Remembering the day in 1865 that Black Americans learned they were finally free from slavery. Some 55 years later, millions of African American families have left the South and headed north and west in what is now looked back on as the Great Migration. Families searched for a better life in industrial cities like Milwaukee. An early map details how many families moved from certain states, like 77 families from Mississippi, 98 from Arkansas, and 102 from the state of Tennessee. Today we're continuing conversations that started decades ago about the importance of racial equality. A milestone in that fight, the fair housing marches of the 60s. They were led by youth here in Milwaukee, and they went on for 200 straight nights. Here's our Carol Meekins.
For nearly a decade, the first woman to sit on Milwaukee's Common Council pushed for fair housing in the city.
We are asking for nothing more than what we deserve as citizens.
In the 50s, Alderwoman Vel Phillips fought for African Americans to live where they wanted. When the Common Council wouldn't listen, she took to the streets.
And we intend to march, all of us, until we get just some of the basic freedoms that are ours.
It started in the summer of 1967. Phillips, alongside Father James Groppe and a few thousand other supporters, marched.
This is my jacket I had as a young commando.
Tyrone Daniels was a commander with the Milwaukee's NAACP Youth Council.
For us in Milwaukee, it started with not being able to live where you want to live.
They volunteered to protect Phillips and Father Groppe.
And then we came on to help the protesters.
The commandos, like Tyrone in 67 and his son Corey years later, served on the front lines of the protests. People marched for 200 consecutive nights from the predominantly black north side to the mostly white south side. They crossed the 16th Street Viaduct, known as Milwaukee's Mason-Dixon line.
I think commandos seen the need of security for the community, and I don't think that it was more so security for an individual, but it was more so for the community, and that's how the north side and the south side met.
When the groups merged, violence erupted.
We have a right to exercise our constitutional God-given right of free speech. That means protest, demonstration, whenever we want.
Protesters and commandos endured bricks, rocks, and bottles thrown at them. Signs with racist messages were seen, and there were verbal threats.
They was there to protect the marchers.
Yes.
Where they wouldn't get hit and all that kind of
stuff. With the bricks and bottles and things that was being thrown at them.
Protests ended in March of 1968, shortly before Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. Phillips considered King a friend. Father Groppe marched alongside him in Selma, Alabama.
So we've lost a great black leader, and right now we are in a period of mourning.
A week later, on April 11th, the Civil Rights Act of 1968 was signed into law. It included the Fair Housing Act. By the end of April, Milwaukee's Common Council passed a fair housing ordinance. Vel Phillips accomplished what she set out to do some 14 years before.
I was so committed to what I was doing. It didn't take me long to realize that people connected with me and depended on me.
Phillips went on to become the first female judge in Milwaukee County, and then the first African-American woman to be elected to statewide office as Secretary of State in 1978.
When you find something that you're getting paid for, that you do for nothing, yet that's the best of all the world.
Father Groppe continued his civil rights activism, marching for equal voting rights and the desegregation of schools. The streets they marched on and the bridges they crossed, now named in their honor.